Thanks for joining us this morning. We wanted to, for this speaker series, talk about rape crisis response. As many of you know, that's one of the things the Women's Center does for Waukesha County. We're a dual agency, so we work with adult and child survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, and human trafficking. So one of the things that we do at the Women's Center is what we call our on-call advocate program. So we're responding 24/7, 365 to sexual assaults. And we respond to Waukesha Memorial Hospital, Community Memorial in Menominee Falls, Moreland Reserve, and we have a partnership with Carroll University. So we're really excited to have our two guest speakers this morning who can talk about the partnership that we have, but also really the importance of having a well-coordinated sexual assault response in a community and the importance of it. So I'm gonna get right to it. I'm not sure who's speaking first, so I'm gonna introduce both of our speakers and then somebody can tell me, then somebody can take it away. But so first we are, one of our speakers is Jake Eisch, who's worked at Carroll University for 11 years, which I didn't know, we just found that out. And Jake's held a variety of roles at Carroll and was just telling us this morning how much he loves working at Carroll University. So in his current role, Jake oversees the student conduct, discipline, documentation, hearings, and sanctioning, as well as the daily operations of Carroll University's Office of Violence Prevention, OVP, as it's called. And that the Office of Violence Prevention serves to educate and engage the campus community in exploring social and systemic factors that contribute to the perpetuation of gender-based violence and sexual misconduct. Because Carroll University is literally right down the street from the Women's Center, we've had a long-standing partnership in a variety of ways, but we're very, we're very pleased with the ability to continue to work with Carroll and specifically Jake and the OVP. Our other speaker is someone I have known for, well, let's see, gosh, Deb. It's been, I don't know, like 15 years perhaps?
At least, yeah.
And so our speaker is Debra Donovan, and Deb has 25 plus years as a sexual assault nurse examiner and has been the SANE program coordinator for Froedtert and the medical college since 2014. She served on the board of the Wisconsin Coalition Against Sexual Assault from 2005 to 10 and has presented to the Wisconsin Legislative Committee for Compassionate Care for Rape Victims. Deb was awarded the WCASA, the Wisconsin Coalition Against Sexual Assault, Voices of Courage and Award for Health Services in 2010, and the Healthcare Hero from the Biz Times in 2012. And from what I know of Deb, this brief bio doesn't even really cover thing that she has done. I can tell you that my when I was working in Milwaukee, Deb was singularly critically important to all of the programs because she provided a lot of the training, the education. But she can also get a little scrappy and feisty and will definitely stand up for survivors and the programs that are working with survivors. So I think we have a great, lucky to have these two speakers with us this morning. So who's going first?
Deb is.
Deb, all right. All right, great. Well, take it away, Deb.
Thank you. Wow, now to have to follow that. I'm sitting outside and I can hear sirens, so I'm hoping that you aren't hearing them all too much. But glad to be with you this morning and just want to give an overview to everyone about what we call medical forensics or what a SANE nurse is. We have been responding since the late 1990s when the development of forensic nursing programs came in nationally, when I think our communities realized we needed to be doing a better job serving victims of sexual assault. And in that journey, we developed some really awesome training. There are 40-hour week-long courses that our nurses take. So these are registered nurses that then take this study for a week to learn the intricacies of dealing with victims of sexual assault in the medical setting. That's based in what we call trauma-informed care. So it's really getting a understanding of how trauma affects someone's emotional and really physical self. And when we see someone in that setting, we realize that we aren't maybe just dealing with the current sexual assault, but may also be dealing with traumas that have affected the person prior to that. And so with that understanding, we realize that our victims are going to be the experts in their care and what they may want during the visit. So our sexual assault responses are really based in victim choice, and that's kind of where we start. So what SANE nurses are especially trained in providing victims with options related to their care at the hospital. So after someone encounters a sexual assault, they might come to one of our emergency rooms. The staff have been trained to immediately call for the sexual assault nurse to come to the hospital. They don't ask a lot of questions initially because we really have an understanding that victims are going to have to probably tell their story more than a few times. And so we try to realize that from the get-go and ask our medical staff to really wait for the SANE nurse to come and then provide the specialty care. The SANE nurse arrives, comes in from home, and then will meet the victim in generally what is an emergency room setting, but it could be in the hospital because it may be someone who came in for other needs. It could be in an outpatient, what we call an outpatient setting. And part of that response also includes having an advocate respond. We work as a team, and so we do work with the volunteers or staff from the Waukesha Women's Center, and we partner as we provide services for the victim in the hospital. Now, these exams, I will tell you, take probably 3 to 4 hours. They can be very detailed because part of what we do is get information from the victim as to what occurred, like you would in any kind of a medical setting, just kind of figure out why the person is there. And in understanding kind of what their experience is, that helps us form our basis of their care. So their care can involve things like an exam, which then means that we're checking pretty carefully the entire body for any kind of marks, bruises, any kind of physical indicators of injury. And we document all that very carefully in the medical record. As part of doing that exam, we offer victims what's called a forensic exam. So part of what we do is also collect evidence, since we know that this experience is a criminal situation where someone's had a crime committed against them. And so part of our work is to be sure that we are protecting any kind of potential forensic DNA evidence that might be on the person, on their clothing, on their body. So we will do that at the same time that we are doing the physical exam. So we are using, our evidence means that we're using like Q-tip swabs to touch places on the body where there may be what we would call foreign DNA. So DNA cells that don't belong to the victim. So we are using just those soft Q-tip swabs to swab on those skin areas. And part of the nurse's work is to be sure in collecting those swabs that they're not contaminated in any other way, that they're dried thoroughly so that we can package those swabs very separately and systematically to preserve evidence that can be used by law enforcement. So those two pieces are kind of the medical forensic exam we call, but I think what's more important is the medical care that we provide victims, making sure that their body is safe and okay, and then offering medical kind of services that can keep their body safe. So thinking about like in women, emergency contraception. So being able to offer victims right on the spot, the ability to have pregnancy prevention. And there was a law that was passed, as we said, that does guarantee that victims are offered this when they come to the emergency room, that they are offered accurate oral and written information about it, and then offered to have the medication if they want it. And I will tell you, by far the majority of victims do take advantage of this. And so that is one piece of what we offer. We also offer medications to protect from sexually transmitted diseases. We kind of go off the premise that the person's been exposed and follow the CDC standards that allow us to give the full treatment for the sexually transmitted disease, so that victims don't have to worry going forward that they may have contracted something, because we have actually fully treated it, and they get all those treatments in the emergency room as well. On a case-to-case basis, we also can offer HIV preventive medication. That one's a little, that's a little bit, what do I want to say, more, it's not like taking a normal antibiotic. So we do and explain a little bit more along with the assistance as to what that treatment regimens be. It's usually a long treatment of a couple of pills per day to try to prevent HIV if someone has had a significant exposure. So we get that medication and that teaching done as well. Well, as I said, during, and then once we finalize the exam and offer these different, all these services, then we're going to help the person think about next steps. So that we hugely do with the assistance of an advocate. So we're looking for assurance that the person has a safe place to go, that they have ideas about where they can reach out if they need assistance moving forward. And that's where our advocacy piece becomes so critical. I always explain that the advocate is like the victim's lifeline, because I can provide the medical care at that point when they need it, when they're in crisis and they're at the hospital, but I'm not going to be the person that's going to be able to walk the walk with them. So that's where the Women's Center has been so critical to the ongoing and continuing of people, you know, helping to recover in healthy ways when this kind of event occurs in their lives. You might be asking or thinking a little bit, I wanted to mention that there is assistance to pay for these exams. We have a couple of funds that we use that are set up that can try to ensure that people are not going to incur cost, or at least significant cost, after these exams. And so the SANE nurse and the advocate will also help that process get started while the person's at the hospital. And what else do I want to say? The other piece, I guess, that the nurses, what we have to realize when we take on this piece of nursing is that we may be called upon in the future to provide testimony related to the sexual assault encounters. So part of our care really detailed documentation of both what the person has told us is their experience, and we in the medical record will actually put the victim's quotes right into the medical record, so that if there is going to be a court proceeding, we actually become a second voice for the victim. We're able to say exactly what the person told us and provide really non-judgmental, objective and accurate reflection of what happened even during the court situation. Let me see. The other thing I'd like to mention is that these SANE programs, such as what I'm describing, really have grown throughout our state. And in Waukesha County, there are 3 medical facilities that provide services as I'm describing. So besides the Froedtert facilities, which are at Community Memorial Hospital in Menominee Falls, and at the Moreland Reserve, which is in New Berlin, There is also services offered by Pro Health, which is Waukesha Memorial, and also by Aurora Healthcare, which is at the Summit facility in Oconomowoc. So our victims really have choices about where they want to receive their medical care, and all of us operate with using the Women's Center as our arm, as our advocate, so that we can jointly provide the kind of standard of care that we feel victims deserve, and then work as well ongoing with our community, other community partners, whether it be law enforcement, prosecution, that type of thing. I should mention about half of our victims, I would say, encounter the medical facilities, having not yet talked with law enforcement. So that's pretty common that people think first of reaching out to get the medical assistance they need. And so one of our objectives also at the point of the exam is assuring that victims understand what choices they have moving forward. So at the exam, our victims can choose whether they want evidence collected or not. That isn't something they have to do. For those victims that are maybe undecided about whether they're going to report to police, they still have the option of having evidence collected, because we have a process now that's been set up with the Department of Justice where the nurse can collect the evidence and we can preserve and store that evidence, send it directly into the crime lab, securely, not interpreted. It's just held there for the statute of limitations, which currently is 10 years. That gives victims then time to figure out whether that's something they want to do moving forward. And if at some point they do decide to report, then the evidence is there and available for law enforcement to use in part of the investigation. So that is an option people have. And so we will describe those options and make sure the person has a good understanding of what kind of decisions they can make at the point of the visit that will help them moving forward. So again, the use of the advocate in these situations is critical, because they help be our gauge in while we're sort of concentrating on the medical and forensic pieces. I know that they've kind of got their eye on how a person is emotionally dealing with this at the point in time. They can kind of give me, say, a heads up, Deb, can we slow down a little bit? Or I think the person has more questions. Can we take some time? And that it's just really critical in us assuring that the person feels safe and comfortable at the point of the exam. And I think really impacts their ability to be starting on that journey if we can be in that place initially that people know they're believed, that they understand that we know this wasn't their fault, and they can help have that assurance that our community is going to respond in a way that's going to be sensitive moving forward. The advocate, one of the things we explain at the hospital as well, so having the advocate for the medical encounter is critical, but having that connection, we also let them know that the advocate will be available should they decide to talk to the police, or if they already have, going forward and talking to the police, talking when they go into any kind of a court possibility. Those are all services that will go with the victim once they've started the encounter at the medical system. So we feel this is just a really important partnership, and we're very pleased that we have such an awesome response from our partners at the Women's Center. So I think I can probably wrap up my part of the presentation, and I'm really excited to hear what Jake has to say. So I'm going to kind of pass the baton.
Thank you. And thanks so much, Deb. That was really great. Just a reminder that you can put questions in the chat as Deb and Jake are talking, or of course you can do it afterwards. We'll still have some time for questions. So thank you. All right, Jake.
Excellent, thank you. And thanks, Deb. That's a lot to follow. You're doing outstanding work. So thank you for all that you and all that your team do. So my name is Jake Eisch. I use he, him, his pronouns. And like mentioned at the beginning, I've been at Carroll for 11 years and have been in a few different capacities here. Dating back at the beginning, namely within our residence life and housing program. So that helps to contextualize my role a little bit, because thinking back to my years spent in that role, part of my responsibilities were being one of those first responders or documenters of assaults that our students had experienced on and off campus. And I'm really reminded of how much we've grown when I think back to those early days of my time at Carroll in our level of informed response, and how much we've changed and how much we've grown and evolved to make sure that that is a much more survivor-centered process that honors that individual in much more significant ways. And I don't think we would have gotten there without the help of the Women's Center. So I really underscore that relationship in that coaching, in that training, and that collaboration along the way. So we're thankful for that relationship. And so our relationship with the Women's Center is vast and complex and goes back a long time. And so I'm going to hit on a handful of the ways that we work together programmatically and in response ways. And if I have enough time, I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that our Office of Violence Prevention is doing in the year ahead, which is also changing in the era of COVID response in the ways that we connect and that we respond with our students. So I mentioned thinking back over our time here at Carroll and the way that we take documentations, the way that we work with survivors. And I would say a critical moment in time in the way that we've changed it and worked to grow that dates back to 2016, when we were approved for an OVW Office for Violence Against Women grant. That really helped us to formalize and get all of our practices together, centralized, aligned, and to just really make a lot more sense. Before, we had responses from public safety, we had responses from residence life, we had responses from different areas that were kind of handling situations on their own. And I don't know that we were talking to each other always very effectively or efficiently, or very appropriately, if I might say that, just in interest of the survivor, honoring their experience, honoring their story, and making sure that we're doing our best. I think we were doing the best with the info and the staffing and what we had at the time, but 2016 played a critical turning point in that, when we were approved for what started out as a 3-year grant through the Office of Violence Against Women that is centered around reduction of gender-based violence on college campuses. In 2019, we were granted another 3-year extension for that grant, which we're really excited about, to be able to continue that work. And where the Women's Center comes into play with that is we started out by developing our own response team, our own CCRT, Carroll Collaborative Response Team. And that's a partnership between Carroll University, our Waukesha Police Department, Public Safety, Residence Life, and of course the Women's Center. And our overall goal with forming that CCRT, that smaller group, is to make sure that our processes are aligned, to make sure that we're speaking to one another so we know exactly if Waukesha Police Department was to receive a report, they'd be able to, in an informed way, say, this is exactly what you can expect from Carroll University and their response to you. If they were to come directly to us at Carroll University and share with us their story, we would be able to say, here we have these great partners at the Women's Center. There may be a 5-minute walk down the street, and here are the services that they can provide to you specifically as well. So we've spent a lot of time in meetings, in travelings, and conferences, and time together to make sure that we know specifically what each other offer, but how we can work collaboratively to make that experience of documentation, referral, documenting with Waukesha Police, moving through adjudication, to make sure that that's as seamless as possible and is as informed as possible. So specifically, obviously our residence life team plays a critical role in that as they develop and foster community within their residence halls. They develop extremely close relationships with their students and are often sometimes the first people that our students will share their stories with. We know that through statistics and studies and information that's shared with us that on college campuses, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men will be impacted by gender-based violence and sexual assault during their time on a college campus. So obviously that shows to us that the issue is significant, that it's pervasive, that it's present, and as we all know, underreported. So we know that the stories that are shared with our staffs are just scratching the surface of what truly exists. But the Women's Center has worked extensively with training our resident assistants on reporting skill development in taking those reports, how to ask appropriate questions, how to have trauma-informed questioning approaches when they're hearing those stories at 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, and how that they can directly link over to that 24-hour advocate at the Women's Center should that be a necessary step and a desired step by the survivor in the moment. All university employees, myself, Lydia on the screen, all of us are determined to be mandatory reporters. So, whether it's a coach, whether it's a resident assistant, whether it's an orientation mentor, a supervisor, an advisor, all of us are charged and tasked with reporting that story forward. We do have a couple confidential options on campus, including our licensed counselors. So we have 3 on campus, 3 full-time counselors that are confidential reporters. Our university chaplain, who's housed here in the Richard Smart House, along with the Office of Violence Prevention, is a confidential reporter. And our nurse practitioner on campus is a confidential reporter. So we value those individuals in knowing that sometimes a student might just want to know, might just want to talk, might just want to share their experience and say, that's what I'm feeling right now. Or going to the health center, which we don't on campus offer a SANE program, but we do get the calendar, get the schedule, and are really well informed with the work that Deb and their team are doing here in Waukesha and at Waukesha Memorial Hospital. So we know consistently how and where and when to link students to those resources that they would need. But our health center does offer, in case if there might have been an injury, they might be able to do a little bit of work to address that. We do offer STI testing and a variety of other services. Our health center is also well informed, trained, and skilled in connecting with the SANE program or just Waukesha Memorial in general, as well as being informed about all of our other response approaches. So the other direct connection with the Women's Center is through our Title IX reporting program. So Suzanne Lidke is our full-time compliance officer and Title IX coordinator here on campus. And anybody that's been paying attention to the news a little bit knows that the Title IX world is evolving right now. And our new process is go live Friday. So we've got some additional and new requirements that are asked of us. And some of that is our big changes, some of them not so much. We're trying to hold the standard of mandatory reporting, our burden of evidence to be the same as it's been. But there are a few behind the scenes things in the adjudication and investigation process that are changing for us. And Suzanne will be launching those and going live with those on Friday. So Title IX, that is our direct reporting mechanism for our students that have experienced and want to share forward their experience with sexual assault and gender-based violence here on campus, or really off campus for that matter as well. And so when they work with Suzanne, Suzanne takes that report, documents their experience, and then also serves to connect that student with all of our institutional and community-based resources. And I know that Crystal Chase has played a vital role in making sure that, so Crystal's our representative from our CCRT. Crystal's provided so much significant feedback, information, connection, and informed response for us. So Crystal remains a trusted colleague for us in that Title IX investigation process and connecting students over to the Women's Center. Crystal's really well informed with the work that we do on campus, our reporting processes and procedures, our supportive approaches and mechanisms. So Crystal's been really great at being able to talk with our students about here's what can happen for you and the ways that we can serve you through the Women's Center. So from a response approach, that's a little bit about what our relationship looks like. Again, through that 24-hour advocate response line, we market that, we share that far and wide with our students. We share that with our resident assistants as they respond to calls. All of our faculty and staff should know very well the services that are available through the Women's Center. Other ways that we partner with the Women's Center, Crystal's worked to present biannually to our CCRT, our expanded CCRT, or our Title IX investigative board. And we've covered a variety of topics, including trauma-informed response to sexual assault, compassion fatigue for those that are doing some of the work, signals of stalking, evolution and implementation of lethality assessments. The list goes on. So a wide variety of ways that Crystal's worked to teach, inform, and educate our team. Through our CCRT, which we meet monthly, which is again our Waukesha Police, Residence Life, Office of Violence Prevention, and Women's Center staff, we work to bounce ideas off of one another about our prevention-based programming. So we'll run by topics, ways that we're delivering those to our students, and the work that's being done. And Crystal's able to offer valuable feedback about maybe where the Women's Center can fit into that prevention programming, some resources that could be offered, a skilled professional that is housed over at the Women's Center that might be able to contribute a voice to it. Really just kind of making sure that the information is accurate, that it's informed, and is going to land with our students. We're currently actually, so within that 24-hour on-call advocate response, we're working to currently identify an afternoon weekly that an advocate would be able to be housed here on campus within the Office of Violence Prevention from the Women's Center. And that's again, like, so we can almost see the Women's Center from our office. If we were to kind of like move the trees and maybe that little bit of a hill, we'd probably be able to see y'all from there. And so we know it's not that far. For our students, sometimes that might as well be Milwaukee. You know, it's not a long distance for in reality, but for whatever reason, that still provides an obstacle for students to be able to walk that 5 minutes to get over to the Women's Center. So we're trying to bridge that and bring it a little bit closer and have somebody here in person that be able to serve confidentially with our students, to be able to meet with them. Sometimes it's nice just to know that you're going to be meeting with somebody that you're not going to see around campus or that you don't have an existing relationship with, and also that you know is a trained and skilled professional through the umbrella or the actual house of the Women's Center. So we find that to be a valuable approach moving forward, and we're working through the final steps to be able to do that. Obviously, in COVID time, there's some obstacles that are being presented there, just in that we make sure that the advocate that would come here would be safe, that they feel safe, and that we're doing all of our due diligence to make sure that that's okay. We've had countless programming collaborations with the Women's Center, from film screenings, panel conversation and representation, outreach, recognition days when we highlight and elevate Domestic Violence Awareness Month, Sexual Assault Awareness Month, when we lift those up and make sure that they're well known around campus, so that we're addressing through informed and educated programming to students. Women's Center has always been a trusted partner for us for our freshman day of service, our day when students first come to campus and they go out and they connect with members of our community that are doing important work to shape the sense of community here in Waukesha. So they go and they help in a bunch of different ways with the Women's Center. And the Women's Center has also offered internships, volunteer opportunities, and ongoing work for some of our alumni as well. So again, our relationship is expansive, it's diverse, and I guess to dial back, one thing where I failed to mention the role of the advocate being critical is within our investigation and adjudication process. So we allow advocates to be present. We don't define who that person could be. That could be somebody, that could be a legal representative, that could be a parent. In the times that I've investigated and worked through some of those, a lot of times it's been a parent that's come. Of course, their information sometimes tends to be limited in the ability to actually talk about resources that are available. They're there for a support mechanism, but they're not really there truly quite as much as an informed advocate. But we always make sure that the Women's Center advocate is highlighted as an option to be able to bring to that investigation so that they can work directly with that student to let them know about what their options are fully in that moment, as well as being that support measure, because our Title IX investigators are not really allowed to be that person that can champion that individual, because the investigative component needs to be equitable to the complainant and the respondent. So that advocate plays a critical role in making sure that that person feels honored, feels safe, and feels informed in the process. So that's a little bit about our relationship with our colleagues right down the road. We're thankful for it. It's helped us improve our processes. I truly believe that when our students trust us enough to share their story with us, we are responding in much more effective ways. And again, I need to underscore the way that the Women's Center has helped us grow and evolve those processes. So if I have a minute, I can share just a couple highlights of what we're doing from the Office of Violence Prevention side this year moving forward. So while we have a strong response approach when these incidents do happen and are experienced by our students, however, we want to also make sure that we are providing strong prevention-based opportunities here on campus as well. That's at the heart of our Office of Violence Prevention. We have a project coordinator, Kanoe, who really is working diligently to develop programs and opportunities, trainings, and conversations with our students in this upcoming year. And in the era of COVID, where we maybe had looked to make a splash and make sure that there were high impact and broad reaching programs, we're narrowing that scope a little bit this year to be small group, high impact. A new initiative that has had some appetite and energy here on campus is a cohort-based or small group-based women's empowerment cluster, I would say. And that's intended to couple our healthy masculinity cohort, which has successfully seen through for 3 years, and it's a 9-week program that a group of about a dozen men go through, where they learn a variety of skills. They talk about bystander intervention. They talk about cultural and personal and systemic issues related to sexual assault. And we usually, when we talk about that with different constituents around campus, they say, well, why aren't we having any of these conversations specifically with women? And our students have shared that with us too. And so while we're working to make sure, because we know that the overwhelming majority of perpetrators are men, we're trying to coach our men to step up, be more educated, and call out their peers. We are looking to engage more with cohort-based groups with women this year as well. We have a media series that focuses on multiple points of media and where toxic relationships and gender-based violence is presented in media. So we're going to work to unpack that in multiple ways. We're going to be doing more film screenings. I know we have one scheduled for November where we're going to be watching Athlete A. If anybody's seen that on Netflix, it's a powerful film dated back to the USA gymnastics team and Larry Nassar. We're going to be partnering with Diverse and Resilient in Milwaukee to talk with our LGBT and queer population here on campus to talk about the ways that they specifically might be experiencing gender-based violence and toxic relationships within their community here on campus. We're going to be doing our bystander intervention programming again, where annually we present to over 1,300 students here on campus to develop skills and approaches on how to step in and intervene where harm may be being done, and encourage them to speak up and speak out in those moments. So we've got a busy year ahead of us, and we're going to be changing the playbook as we go based on what we learn about how this new time is going to change and inform our process. And so I see a question there. What is the participation like for the men's group? How do students get engaged? That's a great question, and I apologize that I didn't clarify that as much in the beginning. So we intentionally keep the group small because we want to keep it intimate. We want to make sure that our students feel comfortable being vulnerable, and we find that those smaller intimate groups lend themselves to that. So each year we cap it at a dozen, and each year we've had about a dozen students that have participated in it. Those students get nominated on campus, and those students are not ones that we identify as being problematic on campus. We're not necessarily using that group to fix or change individuals. We're looking to find champions on campus that have demonstrated high character, have levels of social capital here on campus that can reach far to their specific peer groups. So we work specifically with athletes and fraternity men here on campus in hopes that they will take the content, take those conversations, take those transformative relationships and bring them back to their fraternity, bring them back to their team, that they will start role modeling in the locker room where they're hearing maybe sexist comments, where they're hearing homophobic language, where they're hearing sexualization of their peers, and calling that out in significant ways. So we're hoping that we take this group that's already on board, and then that prongs out to make a positive impact on campus. So like I mentioned, we've done that for 3 years now. We've maxed out our capacity in the last couple of years, and we're going to be launching that again this year for a 4th year. So we find that our guys are a little bit hesitant at the beginning of that 9-week series, because really for the most part, when we talk with them, they've never had these conversations before. Consent, bystander intervention, knowing the nuances of communication within an intimate and sexual relationship, they're not being taught that in high school. Most of them share with us that they've never had these conversations with their parents or with a loved one. So it's risky for them, it's vulnerable for them, it's uncomfortable for them, but we find that over time, as that trust grows, they really end up opening up a lot and really trusting their peers in those conversations. They share their stories about their own experiences, good, bad, and otherwise, and we found it to be pretty transformative. So we're looking forward to more opportunities like that.
I hope that just this brief time with Jake and Deb does give everybody a broader perspective of what goes into supporting survivors of sexual assault, and basically all of the moving parts for rape crisis response. So we want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. And is this our last speaker series for 2020? All right, so we'll be putting together our speakers series for 2021, which sounds weird. Sounds so far away, but we'll be doing that. And so you all have something to look forward to.